Hey everybody, this is Jay Evans, and you are listening to the Jay Evans Thoughtcast, seeking to encourage, spark conversation, and make you laugh all in one episode. On today's episode, we've got Chris Mack. We are live from Mad Jack's in Muncie, Indiana. If you hear a little bit of an echo, it is because we are in a warehouse recording this episode, but it's all good. So I've known Chris for a couple years now. We met at the Feed My Sheep benefit. And we've been friends on Facebook ever since. And a couple weeks ago, I saw an article pop up from the Star Press, and he was on the front of the article. So I opened it up, and it says, in the middle of Chris Mack's performances, after he has revved up the crowd with about 2 or 3 energy-building songs, something happens that prompts a few blank stares. The rapper introduces himself, then he tells them he's a believer in Jesus Christ. The music doesn't stop, but the religious reference does make some audience members pause for a second. After all, house parties in basements and Ball State University Village bars, where Mack often performs, aren't the most conventional settings for discussing a topic as heavy as faith. He actually has had people leave his shows because of it. He knows some of them have walked out muttering words of disapproval or questioning why he's there. So Chris, thanks for being on the podcast. So before we dive in, let's talk about how you got to where you are now. What brought you to making music?
Well, the funny thing is that I grew up in a household where we loved listening to music, but even the possibility of making music never crossed my mind. And so around the second grade, my dad and my step grandfather at the time, we built a studio, or not we, like I did it, but they built the studio in the garage in the new home that we were living in. So I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. We moved from the west side in an apartment to the south side of Indianapolis, got a home, got to use the garage and it was probably like an eighth of the garage where they built walls and put a glass window in and started creating music. And so at that point where I got the chance to watch my dad create, I started to think about the fact that, okay, like there are items at my disposal here that I could be using too. Matter of fact, what would it be like if I started writing rap as well? And so the reason why it's so important for me too, and it plays a role in my faith, is that my dad went from, rapping, and this is in the second grade, so he went from rapping about his lifestyle of, drugs, money, gang-related violence. And so these were things that he was actually living out. But then around my 5th grade year, so I'm 11 at this time, he starts rapping about Jesus. And the influence of that, other than the music, is just the people that he was around. And so at that point, I was really intrigued in seeing how music played a role in changing his life. And it was really all I knew. Like, I'm the opposite of my dad. My lifestyle is completely different from the way he used to live. And so culturally, Jesus was something, all that I really knew. You know what I'm saying? And then I started making music. And at that point, I kept going, started seeing that, okay, I'm actually pretty good at this. I started getting better, started having more gigs, more opportunities, started working with more people. And then, in the midst of studying in grade school and studying in college, I knew that this was something that I wanted to do for a long time. So I'm still doing it. I'm still here. Yeah. And it's working.
Cool. So the one thing that I admire is, I don't believe that for a song to have a good message that it has to have Jesus in it. Yeah. But I do think there needs to be songs that do just straight up talk about Jesus. And I think, because the big thing in here is, it's not just that you're making music about your faith, but that you're doing it in Ball State. So share a little bit of the context in some of these shows and bars where you're kind of the vibe of Ball State. Yeah. For people that might not know.
So that's really fun because coming into Ball State my freshman year, and again, I'm like, yo, this is a new market for me. This is a new environment. Already I'm living on my own. But we know that college life still got a cushion. But you feel empowered. And so it's like, here are people wanting to explore who they are and try new things. And it also means new listeners. And so right away, I was drawn to being able to interact with listeners who believed in Jesus and who didn't believe in Jesus. And being a rapper that is faith-based, like the market that I was used to presenting my music in front of were people within the churches or, church block party events. And so this was the time where I got to branch out and think, okay, like, how do I take this music and this faith into scenes that are unconventional when it comes to Christian music? And I think it was kind of hard to figure out at first, right? Like, okay, I don't really like go to, parties on campus anyway. And so like, I remember I went to my first party with my roommate at the time, first house party. And I was like, yo, this just isn't appealing to me at all. Right? Like, I don't drink, you know what I mean? And, I don't smoke, and you know what I mean? Like I say this just to be real, man, but I've tried my fair share of like dirty dancing in grade school and like getting rejected from that. Like, I was a dude at the party where the woman was like, I don't want to dance with you. So it's like, now I'm like, I don't really have any game. So I'm just kind of at a standstill here. I'm like frozen in my tracks, like beer pong, people passed out. And so I just don't know what to do with myself at this point. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so being in that space just to try to have a good time was like very difficult for me. So to even think like, okay, now how do I bring hip hop even in this was a hard concept for me to grasp. And yet at the same time, I knew that the music that I made still struck a chord with people who didn't believe in Jesus. And the opportunities where I got to present that kind of content in front of people was through the student organizations. So like, I was involved with Poetic Summit my freshman year of 2011. And that was like a group that put on some of the most powerful events when it comes to like using poetry and spoken word and slam poetry to speak and bring a message across for an audience to hear. And so it was really those showcase spaces where I got a chance to show my content and perform in front of people. And it was a mixed audience of like, okay, you got freshmen, and then you also have all the way up to seniors. You got black, you got white, you got Latino, you got Asian. You also got believers and non-believers, someone who different religions, all in this mixed audience. And of course, those student organizations and even campus events like the Ball State Talent Search and even the halftime show for the basketball game. I've gotten a chance to participate in those spaces. And so after I started doing some of those gigs, I started warming up to, okay, like, let me go ahead and try to, hop in and Be Here Now and, attend an open mic or be a part of this showcase. Because the other thing that happened is I would have people invite me to those platforms too. And
those people that are Christians or just people that are into your music?
Just into the music. Okay. Yeah, like someone who's throwing an event or a showcase and saying, hey, like, I enjoy your music. I don't believe in it, but right. And they wouldn't say that right out the gate, you know what I mean? But it's like, oh man, like, yo, your stuff's good for Christian music. Or like, what usually happened is it wasn't even that I had songs that screamed Jesus all the time. It was usually someone recognizing that I wasn't cussing in my lyrics. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like for hip hop, like to have a hip hop artist not use one explicit lyric. Right. And that's relative. Like, I think what may define explicit might be subject matter more than words used. You know what I'm saying? But for someone to see that, oh, he's not using any cuss words, he must be a Christian rapper, but it's good. And that's the part of the introductory phase that I talked about. Is like, usually I don't come out right out the gate being like, yo, what's up? I'm Chris Mack. I love Jesus. You know what I mean? It's like, sometimes I don't want to feel like that is mandatory.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't do that in my conversations on a day-to-day. And so it usually takes time. And so I treat my music the same way, where it's like an introduction and you get to know me and you get to know what I'm about and you start to hear it. You start to discover it in the lyrics. And so as people discover that, they recognize like, hey, this is actually really good. And I don't know if I would have continued listening to this if I knew it was Jesus music to begin with. So it's honestly, I just let the music speak for itself, man, because God has a way of using that. And I think you're right in saying that, you know, you don't have to scream Jesus in every lyric in order for it to have the power of Jesus behind it. But it's completely fine to make a song where you don't even hear Jesus, but it's like, okay, this person's morals and values reflect this religion or this disbelief. So just the fact that I don't cuss in my lyrics, like I just don't even cuss on a day-to-day, you know what I'm saying? Like even when I'm upset, like, and that's not to say I don't get mad. It's just, it's not in my regular vocabulary. Right. So yeah, for people to see that, it's like, okay, this must mean something.
So you started in 2011 at Ball State. Was that when you started doing the music as well?
No, so I started writing music.
Or I mean performing, like when you were starting to get out there more. When was that?
Oh, on Ball State's campus?
Yeah,
2011.
So,
like right out the gate, I'm like, because I had already been making music beforehand. And so going on Ball State's campus, I knew that like, yeah, I'm trying to, and it wasn't even for the right reasons either. It's like, yeah, I'm trying to get people to see me. I want people to know that like I'm dope. Like I got bars. They need to hear this. Yeah. Let me, try to share the music with the masses as much as possible.
So you started in 2011, and your latest EP came out in 2018. So did that, knowing that that's kind of the shows that you could be in, did that impact your songwriting?
Yeah,
when it came to it?
I think it did. So that, along with, I think there's my environment, how I've grown in my faith as well, have influenced the way that I write music now. And so I had mentioned that culturally, Jesus was one of those things that I grew up with, right? Like I grew up going to church. That's actually a very common thing even within Black culture. It's like you go because your family goes. Like the church and Black culture are like deeply connected. And so much that what can happen, unfortunately, at sometimes is you associate church and faith in Jesus with culture, but the weight of the gospel may not actually weigh on your heart. And so culturally, Jesus was what I knew. And I think God was working with me as I continued to grow up. But, I didn't really challenge myself, and I would even scratch that out and better yet say, I didn't let the gospel really sink in until around my junior year of high school, where it's like, yo, I'm actually deeply convicted of my sin and I need to stop playing. Yeah. Like, what does it mean for me to crack open the Word of God? Because I hated reading the Bible. I just didn't like reading at all. So to have this massive book with all these stories is like, okay, I'm going to just listen to the pastor preach on Sunday so that way I know what this is about. Yeah. But not really reading it for myself, not really fellowshipping with God. So as I've gotten older, my music has shifted from, lyrics about Jesus and it's like borderline cheesy too, because it's like, and I wouldn't say these in the music, but it's almost like, oh yeah, Jesus is hip, Jesus is cool. And it's like people want to know, like, music really touches you when you start to open up and you start to reveal the hidden flaws and the skeletons in your closet. Like, how is God working for you in those situations?
Yeah.
Like, I hear that God is good, but like, how's he good to you? Like, I want specifics. And so as I've gotten older and even building relationships with people around me who didn't believe in Jesus, actually, even those who did, and seeing like how to wrestle with faith, because like, I'm battling with depression, you know what I mean? And like, people keep telling me to just have faith, but like, what does that actually mean for me to live that out? Like, I don't feel happy. Or, you know what I mean? Like, how do you deal with suicide? And so just hearing like this huge platter of issues, and even knowing like personally, one of the biggest things that I struggle with, and I even need to take heed of today, is like pornography. Like, that was the other thing that really confused me making music, is like, I'm rapping about Jesus, but I'm like watching porn. And that started in the 5th grade. And so again, as I started to mature, getting older, I started to see the value of like, okay, how about I start telling some stories now of like hurt and pain? And how about I start telling people my sins, so that way they know I'm not just saying this and I don't empathize or sympathize. But that, what I'm saying holds weight because I've seen God work in my life. And so, yeah, I would say from like the very first album that I put out when I was in college compared to the EP I put out in 2018 are significantly different, because I don't feel that pressure of, okay, but I need to make sure I say Jesus in these songs. Right. It just kind of happens subconsciously. Yeah. Of like in the lyric writing process. And now it's I need to make sure that people feel this. And the Lord's going to give me inspiration on how to do that.
Yeah. I think people connect with authenticity, and that it's a testament to that, and the fact that people that have no idea who Jesus is can connect with music that's about Jesus. Yeah. And that reminds me a lot of, the apostles in Acts, and people are like, these are not educated men. Yeah. Well, like, they're like, these are common men. Like, there's nothing special about this guy, but there's something special about him, And so, and I see that. Who are we waving at?
My pastor.
Okay.
Josh Hollowell, Whitney Hollowell, his wife, and his lovely daughter, Millie Hollowell. I gave him a whole shout out. I'll have to let them listen to this. I said they first name, they last name, and everything. I just shouted y'all out on the podcast. I gave names, address, and everything.
Social security number?
Well, I wasn't sure if you'd be working in there, so yeah, doing all right.
I'm Jay. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, Josh.
Is there anything you want to tell the people?
Tell the people? What podcast is this?
This is the Jay Evans Thoughtcast.
Thoughtcast.
The Thoughtcast.
Yeah. What's the topic for today's Thoughtcast?
Sharing Jesus at house parties and bars in the village at Ball State.
Yeah.
I know it.
Yeah, man.
That's awesome.
Cool, bro. Good to see you, man. You still gonna be around?
Yeah, I'm in there. Adriana's coming at 1, but I'm in there. I gotta finish sermon and all sorts of stuff.
Do your thing, man.
Josh, nice to meet you.
That's fun. I hope that stays.
Yeah,
but if it doesn't, that's fine.
That's it. That's the podcast. We're gonna keep it rolling.
Let's go.
And I think a lot about, like, I put out an EP in 2015, and sometimes people like Christian music because it's like they're a Christian and they know what it's talking about. Yeah. So you want to make music that has a good meaning to it, and even if somebody has never read the Bible before, they can say, you know what, there's something interesting about this. And I think about how Jesus, although he was crucified, like before things got ugly, like he was a likable guy. Like people wanted to hang out with Jesus.
Yes.
And so you hear Christians and their favorite passage is, we need to be enemies of the world. Like, well, you look at Jesus and like the hookers liked him, the tax collectors liked him. Bro. Like people liked Jesus, and I'm doing a Bible study going through John, and it describes Jesus as the truth.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, we all want to be around honest people, like real people.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine being around Jesus who is 100% real?
Bruh.
Like there's no phoniness with Jesus.
He
Like,
keeps it 100.
He's as real as it gets. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's why people liked him. People connect with that.
Yeah.
I remember seeing,
Yeah. The funny thing is that's also why people hated him too. Like,
Yeah.
Well, and of course we're talking Pharisees here,
Yeah.
right? But man, okay. Anyway, keep going.
But I remember, talking about music with a big one right now who keeps getting bigger is NF. And there's a video on the React channel of people that watch videos and react, and they get like halfway through the video, and as soon as it comes on, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is NF," and they're bumping, and they get halfway through, and they're like, "Wait, he's a Christian?" And because they're like sharing his story, and they're like, and I remember they say something, I don't know if it's exactly, but they're like, but his music's good. And it's like, man, how sad is that? They're like, you know what, he's a Christian, but his music is good.
Yeah, bro. That's something else, man. I think that, there's just a variety of reasons of like doubt, you know what I mean, and people who don't believe where, I was just talking to a lady a couple of weeks ago who had expressed that, she thought that God was like this fairy in the sky, you know what I mean? Like laughed at the idea of like God even being a thing. But as you dive into those conversations, and this is my mantra when it comes to music, of like when I perform, I'm looking for these kind of conversations, just life conversations where, it takes maybe a good 30 minutes to an hour where she's starting to peel back layers of, I have this church hurt to, you know what, like to be honest, I want to believe that there's a God. It's just, I've been let down so many times. It's hard for me to believe in God. And it always stems from something, like I think there's always going to be that if someone like considers himself atheist, like there's got to be something in the back of their mind that's wondering. You know what I mean?
It's too important to disregard.
Yeah.
When you think about it. And I think about, at these shows, and, there's sometimes people say, Christians shouldn't be associated with that person. You shouldn't be here and you shouldn't be there. But you think of all the people that are there that are never going to go into church.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the majority of the students at Ball State.
Yeah.
Like they have no desire to go to church, but they're going to be exposed to it. And they're going to say, wow, not everybody's super preachy when it comes to faith and stuff like that. And I used to think, being a Christian was about, you have to act this way. You have to talk like that. And I finally hit a point where it's just like, Jesus just wants to invade every part of my life.
Yeah.
Like I need to know Jesus and let him change me and just live that changed life.
Yeah.
And like wherever I am, I'm just going to be me, but I want to be the me that, he's working on, he's shaping, he's molding. Hope this podcast was an encouragement to you. It would mean the world to me if you would leave a review or share it with a friend, share it on social media, whatever you want to do. Have a good one. God bless you.